The music industry is in a strange place right now. Scroll through TikTok or Instagram Reels and most of what you will be hearing is 15-second song snippets, usually just a catchy chorus on repeat. The songs are getting shorter, hooks are getting louder and more formulaic, and everything is optimized for instant gratification in the world where instant gratification is just a single push away. But while pop music has been getting more and more formulaic, there has been another movement bubbling under the surface. Experimental artists are pushing back against this new norm. There has been a movement of artists prioritizing blending genres, stretching song structures, and creating music that refuses to fit into a short, replayable snippet. As much as it may seem like music is dying right now in 2025 because of how generic a lot of the Billboard charts sound right now, the underground and especially experimental music is at an all-time high right now. With that in mind, for any music lovers out there watching this who want to try and find some new music to listen to that differs from what's popular right now and what sounds very commercial sounding, I'd like to give some artists blowing up in the experimental scene right now from different sectors of that genre. I'm going to preface this saying not all of these artists and albums are necessarily experimental based on the genre's common descriptors. Rather, they are revolutionizing both their closest respective genre, as in experimental hip-hop, as well as doing something different sounding for the music industry as a whole. This video will also be only recapping the big names either coming to prominence in the 2020s or making big moves in the 2020s. There are other hugely influential experimental artists and albums like Captain Beefheart's works, or the esteemed works by the experimental hip-hop act Death Grips, but this is just what has been running the underground in the modern day.
I'ma need a bigger bag for the cohort. Trying to make a millionaire out of slum dogs. Bet that head crack blunt force.
When it comes to experimental hip-hop, there are two different sectors that have reached much success in the underground, even often pushing into the mainstream at times. Abstract hip-hop is the first of the two. Abstract hip-hop is categorized as hip-hop music with non-conventional or experimental sounding production that draws from genres like jazz, funk, electronic, and ambient music. The genre also emphasizes complex lyricism, often leaning on storytelling, especially discussing politics, human emotion, and hardship, and other topics rarely discussed in mainstream hip-hop. The first rapper coming to mind and one of the artists that has repopularized the genre within the underground in the 2020s is Earl Sweatshirt, especially since his 2018 release Some Rap Songs. Since then, he has continued to develop his production style, working with prominent producers like The Alchemist on his 2023 record, Voyeur Dire. On the polar other end of the spectrum, the other large movement under experimental hip-hop is cloud rap. Cloud rap is categorized as being music involving rapping over ethereal and dreamy sounding production, as well as reverb-heavy vocals and ambient textures. Lyrically, cloud rap differs from the more conscious lyrics of abstract hip-hop with introspection and lyrics about drug use, especially psychedelics. The artist from the subgenre who has arguably seen the most success is Blade, being the forefront of a group of Swedish rappers within the genre of cloud rap titled Drain Gang.
I can feel my face, oh God. SMH, no ASMR.
Rapping off experimental hip-hop with experimental hip-hop. This section is merely artists who fall under the experimental hip-hop umbrella, but I would not consider them to be either abstract hip-hop or cloud rap. Safely the biggest name from this section, and possibly the biggest name coming out of experimental hip-hop this decade, is JPEG Mafia. JPEG Mafia is a rapper who has been extremely active, continually releasing new music that expands into different styles with ease. Just last year, he released an album titled I Lay Down My Life For You, which got much recognition and acclaim, even pushing into very mainstream playlists despite being a blend of experimental hip-hop and even metal. I saved this one for last because it opens up an intriguing discussion to be had in the comments below about the validity of this, as a new emerging genre thanks to the rise in experimental hip-hop in the 2020s, eventually transcending into something beyond just experimental hip-hop. This Rate Your Music user described post-rap as being hip-hop's aesthetics as a facilitator for timbre texture and atmosphere as a sonic focal point exceeding conventional structures, rapping, and production. I know that's confusing for literally anyone out there, so I'm going to break it down. In simple terms, this just means post-rap is a style of hip-hop that moves beyond normal rapping and song formats. Instead, it uses the basic elements of hip-hop, like rapping, as just another instrument like the drums or the bass in the songs, to create an experimental soundscape. Post-rap focuses on an overall atmosphere, while experimental hip-hop mostly focuses on the rapping, no matter how unconventional that rapping can get. Hyperpop is the most sonically abrasive subgenre of experimental pop, being categorized as a high-energy blend between pop and EDM, featuring lots of autotune and a lot of distortion. It's often poked fun at by casual music listeners when hits like Money Machine make it into the TikTok soundbites, but the subgenre has developed a cult following in the underground and is crucial to experimental pop music as a whole. Very often mixed up with hyperpop, electropop is also a blend of pop and electronic dance music. However, it doesn't necessarily feature the same high-energy, distorted production and vocals and overpowering autotune. The genre is probably the single quickest growing subgenre of experimental music I will touch on in this entire video, and probably also the most accessible. The biggest artist from electropop currently is also one of the biggest artists in the world right now, seeing a huge spike in popularity after her acclaimed trend-setting record we all know very well, Brett. It's Charlie XCX. This section is just dedicated to artists emerging in the 2020s who loosely fall under the experimental pop umbrella, but not under either of the two big subgenres of experimental pop. Artists here feature artists like Jane Remover, who got her start from online music reviewing spaces before moving up to opening for acts like JPEG Mafia and even recently Turnstile. The windmill scene is a music scene emerging out of Brixton, London, England in the 2010s, but truly reaching a huge rise in stardom within the 2020s. The scene involves bands who blend genres like progressive rock, jazz, experimental rock, and most especially post-punk, leading to its common genre descriptor as post-punk revival, being this style of music that calls back to the post-punk of the 70s and 80s, with bands like Sushi and the Banshees or Joy Division. Two bands in particular have been hugely influential to the growth of this scene and have really fought to keep rock music alive, especially experimental rock, within the underground. Black Midi and Black Country New Road have both cleverly used their wide range of influences to create a new, unheard of sound that can range from overpowering to existential. I recognize this is not a wide-ranging section, as experimental rock can encompass many more subgenres, but for the simplicity of the video, this is just other bands that do not fall under the post-punk revival of the 2020s experimental rock. Although I will say, if you want me to dive deeper into any of these subgenres of experimental music, comment down below and I'll make videos separate for each one of those. For this part though, a band like Geese is probably my favorite from this section as of recent. I saw them in concert opening for King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard last year, and I loved it. Their new album too was very good. They have a super unique style which emphasizes the singer Cameron Winter's wide vocal range as instrument rather than just merely singing. Generally the most mainstream of the sections in this video, excluding the exception that is Charlie XCX, these are the artists that use their traditional soft, catchy, and impressive vocal abilities blended with alternate progressions in production or vocal styles to create R&B music that differs from what is popular in the mainstream. My absolute favorite here is evanmnm. evanmnm began making music in 2015, starting off producing ambient music before diving into vocal-driven pop and R&B in the later 2010s and heavily in the 2020s with albums like Heaven to a Tortured Mind and Hop Between Worlds. The music involves everything ranging from progressive rock, psychedelia, post-punk, R&B, and everything in between. I saved the most traditionally experimental music for last, as it is by far the most jarring and has not seen much commercial success despite its typical critical acclaim it receives. This kind of music has always been prominent in the underground but has been jump-started in the 2020s, especially over the COVID-19 pandemic, where everyone was forced to stay at home. Being stuck at home alone for over a year, stuck in isolation, people began to take up new hobbies. Some creatively driven musicians jumped at this isolation to get their start in music, leading to a trend of experimental sounding music by new artists. Shoo Shoo is a band that has been making music forever now, but they fall under this categorization the best, as it is impossible to place a single genre label under anything they make. Of course, I'm not going to hit every single experimental artist out there. This is merely a recap of some of the big artists pushing against the norm in the music industry within this decade. So while mainstream music might be getting safer and more corporate sounding than ever, there's an equal extreme of abrasive, experimental music pushing a sound that is challenging what is possible with music. Thank you all for watching. Subscribe if you want to be kept up to date with everything music, and have a fantastic rest of your day.